She posted pictures of us with captions about finding the one after our second date. I should have run then. Hey, this is Christopher. I thought I knew what loneliness felt like during my marriage. Turns out I had no clue. That was just numbness, like being slowly suffocated with a silk pillow. This emptiness after the divorce papers were signed, this was actual loneliness. The kind that hits you at 2 a.m. when you're eating cereal for dinner and realize nobody gives a shit if you come home or not. I promised myself I wouldn't do the whole rebound thing. Wouldn't jump into anything just to fill the void. Rhonda and I had been dead in the water for years before we finally called it quits, and I knew damn well it was partly my fault. I got comfortable, stopped paying attention, let work consume everything until we were basically roommates who shared a mortgage and argued about whose turn it was to buy groceries. But you know how it is? Everyone's got opinions about what you should be doing post-divorce. My buddy Mike kept pushing me to get back out there, said I was wasting my prime years. Easy for him to say. He's been married to his college sweetheart for 15 years and thinks dating apps are something teenagers use. That's how Serena came back into the picture. She was at this barbecue Mike threw, standing by the beer cooler, looking like she belonged there. I remembered her from way back. She used to run in Rhonda's college circle, always on the periphery of things. Never really talked much, but she had this way of watching everything, filing it all away. Ronnie used to say Serena was harmless but intense. Should have paid more attention to that last part. The weird thing was how natural it felt talking to her. No awkward divorce guy trying too hard energy. She remembered stuff about me I'd forgotten I'd ever mentioned, like how I used to brew beer in my garage, or that camping trip Rhonda and I took to Yellowstone where I got food poisoning from gas station sushi. Serena laughed at all the right parts. Made me feel like I was actually interesting instead of just some guy going through the motions. She asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. Just like that. No games, no waiting 3 days to text, none of that bullshit. Said she'd always thought I was one of the good ones, that Rhonda was lucky to have me. I won't lie, that felt incredible to hear. When you spent 2 years having someone treat you like you're invisible, having someone actually see you hits different. Our first date was at this Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, but she'd made reservations, suggested the wine, had clearly put thought into it. And man, she was full of compliments. Told me I looked great, that she could tell I'd been hitting the gym. Said she'd always admired how dedicated I was to my work, how I could talk to anyone at parties, how I never seemed to get rattled by anything. I mean, it was a lot. More praise than I'd gotten in years. But it felt genuine, like she was seeing qualities in me that had gotten buried under all the day-to-day married couple bullshit. She kept saying things like, I always wondered what you were really like, and Rhonda never gave you enough credit. The intensity should have been a red flag. Normal people don't come at you with that level of focused attention on date one. But I was raw, man. Vulnerable in ways I didn't even recognize. Having someone look at me like I was worth something, like I was this catch who'd been undervalued. It was intoxicating. She texted me that night saying she had an amazing time, that she couldn't wait to see me again. Not thanks for dinner or talk soon. Full paragraphs about how refreshing it was to spend time with someone who actually had his life together, who knew what he wanted. She said she'd forgotten what it felt like to be excited about someone. I read that text about 5 times. Part of me was flattered as hell. Part of me was wondering why she was coming on so strong. But mostly I was just relieved that someone wanted me. That's simple. After feeling like damaged goods for months, having someone eager to be around me felt like finally exhaling. I told myself I'd take it slow this time. Really pay attention. Not ignore warning signs like I had with Rhonda. But Serena made it easy to believe this could be different. She had this way of making me feel like the version of myself I'd forgotten existed. Confident, desirable, worth pursuing. Looking back, I should have trusted that nagging feeling in my gut. The one that wondered why she was so sure about me so fast. Why she talked about us like we were already something serious. But when you're coming off years of feeling like you're not enough, having someone think you're more than enough feels like salvation. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that maybe I'd learned something from my marriage falling apart. That I could spot the difference between someone who wanted to know me and someone who just wanted to want someone. Turns out wanting to believe something and actually believing it are two very different things.
Hey there, this is Serena. I still remember the first time I saw Christopher at one of Rhonda's parties. She was showing him off like some prize she'd won, and honestly, I got it. He had that quiet confidence thing going. Not arrogant, just solid. The kind of guy who could fix your car and discuss wine in the same conversation. Rhonda always acted like she'd settled for him, but I could see what she couldn't. Or maybe what she took for granted. When I came to know Christopher would be at the barbecue, I spent 2 hours getting ready. Not obvious about it, but careful. The right jeans that made my ass look good without trying too hard. The blue top that brought out my curves. I'd been divorced 6 years by then. 6 years of watching all my friends couple up, while I dated losers who couldn't commit or successful guys who treated me like I was temporary. You have to understand, men like Christopher don't just become available. They get snapped up fast, usually by women who know exactly what they've got. Rhonda was an idiot for letting him slip away, but her loss was potentially my gain. I wasn't about to waste the opportunity by playing it cool and letting some other woman swoop in. The moment I saw him, looking a little lost but trying to seem fine, I knew this was it. My shot. He looked good, better than good. The divorce had clearly motivated him to get in shape, and there was something about recently single guys that made them more open, more grateful for attention. Less entitled. I positioned myself nearby and waited for the right moment to approach. Made it seem casual, like I just happened to notice him. But I'd been studying him from across the yard, noting how he held himself, how he smiled when Mike's kids ran over to show him something. Still that same gentle way with people that had caught my attention years ago. When we started talking, it was like unlocking a combination I'd been working on for years. I remembered everything. Every story Rhonda had told about him, every detail she'd shared and then dismissed. The beer brewing, the camping disasters, his thing about vintage motorcycles, he never had time to restore. Rhonda used to roll her eyes at these interests, call them his little hobbies. I made sure to ask about every single one. The look on his face when I brought up the Yellowstone trip was priceless. He actually seemed surprised that anyone had been listening, that anyone remembered. That's when I knew I had an opening. This wasn't just about being recently divorced. This was about being genuinely unseen in his marriage. Rhonda had trained him to expect indifference. I asked him out before he could overthink it. Men like Christopher, they need to feel wanted, but they also need to feel like they're not being pressured. So I made it sound spontaneous, like the idea had just occurred to me. Told him I'd always thought he was one of the good ones, which was true. I had thought that. I'd also thought Rhonda was a fool for not appreciating what she had. Planning that first date, I pulled out all the stops without making it obvious. Found a restaurant I knew he'd mentioned liking years ago. Rhonda had complained it was too romantic, too much effort for a regular dinner. I made reservations, researched the wine list, even wore the perfume I'd seen him compliment on another woman at a party once. Details matter when you're trying to make someone fall in love with you. And it worked. He was putty in my hands from the moment I started praising him. Told him he looked incredible, that I could see he'd been taking care of himself. Mentioned how I'd always admired his work ethic, his way with people. All true things, but I laid it on thick because I could tell he was starving for it. The best part was when I started comparing him favorably to Rhonda. Not directly, I'm not stupid, but in ways that made it clear I saw his value where she hadn't. Told him Rhonda never gave him enough credit for how thoughtful he was, how he could make anyone feel comfortable in a conversation. Watched his whole posture change as he soaked it up. By dessert, I was already planning date 2. Already seeing how this could play out if I handled it right. Christopher wasn't just a catch, he was the catch. Doctor, stable, kind, recently available, and clearly ready to appreciate someone who actually wanted to be there. Someone who wouldn't take him for granted like Rhonda had. I texted him that night with full paragraphs about how amazing he was, how refreshing it was to spend time with a real man who had his priorities straight. None of that wait 3 days bullshit. I wanted him to go to sleep thinking about me, to wake up knowing I was serious about this. The thing is, I wasn't playing games. I genuinely did think he was incredible. But I also knew I couldn't afford to lose him to some other woman who might play harder to get or seem more mysterious. I was 37. I'd wasted enough time on men who weren't marriage material. Christopher was marriage material, And he was right there, vulnerable and grateful and ready to be loved properly. I just had to make sure he understood how rare this opportunity was. For both of us.
2 weeks in, and I felt like I was drowning. Not in a good way, in that panicky, can't catch your breath way, where you realize you've gotten in way deeper than you meant to. Serena had gone from charming and attentive to something else entirely. Something that felt less like romance and more like a campaign. She started showing up at my office with lunch. Just appeared one day with sandwiches from this deli across town, saying she'd been in the neighborhood. Except there was nothing in that neighborhood she could have been there for. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off, said she'd driven 20 minutes out of her way just to surprise me. Made it sound romantic instead of what it actually was, calculated. The texts were constant. Good morning texts with paragraphs about how she couldn't wait to see me. Good night texts that went on forever about how perfect we were together. Random afternoon messages asking what I was doing, who I was with, when I'd be free next. If I didn't respond within an hour, she'd follow up asking if everything was okay. And the gifts. Jesus, the gifts. Expensive wine she'd researched based on some offhand comment I'd made. A vintage motorcycle magazine subscription because she remembered me mentioning I used to be into bikes. Tickets to a beer brewing workshop that cost more than most people spend on a weekend vacation. All accompanied by notes about how she couldn't resist when she saw them, how they made her think of me. I tried to pump the brakes, told her she didn't need to spend money on me, that I preferred taking things slow. She said she understood but kept doing it anyway. Started framing it differently. Said she just loved seeing me happy, that she'd never been with someone who appreciated thoughtful gestures the way I did. That's when I realized she wasn't listening to me at all. She was listening to some version of me she'd created in her head. The grateful divorcee who needed to be convinced of his own worth. The undervalued husband who'd finally found someone who truly saw him. She'd cast me in this role and was directing the whole production. By week 3, she was talking about exclusivity. Not asking, telling. Said she deleted her dating apps because she knew what she wanted. Asked if I was still seeing other women with this wounded look that made me feel like a bastard for even having options. I wasn't actually dating anyone else, but the assumption that we were automatically exclusive rubbed me wrong. When I said I thought we should keep getting to know each other before making commitments, she got this look. Like I'd slapped her. Said she thought we were past the games, that she could tell I was just scared of intimacy because of my divorce. Turned my reasonable boundary into my psychological problem that she could help me fix. That's when it clicked. Serena wasn't falling for me. She was falling for the idea of locking me down. Every conversation somehow circled back to my career, my house, my financial stability. She'd mentioned things like how nice it would be to have a partner who could actually provide security, how refreshing it was to date a man who had his life together. She started positioning herself in my life like we were already serious. Changed her social media relationship status to in a relationship without asking. Posted pictures of us from our dates with captions about how happy she was to finally find the one. The breaking point came when she suggested I meet her parents. We'd been dating less than a month, and she was talking about Sunday dinners and family vacations. When I said it felt too soon, she accused me of stringing her along. Said I was wasting her time if I wasn't serious about a future together. A future together. A month in, and she was already planning our life. That's when I understood what was really happening. Serena wasn't interested in getting to know me. She was interested in securing me. Like I was some kind of investment she needed to lock in before the market shifted. I started paying attention to how she talked about other couples. Always focused on what the men provided. Their jobs, their houses, their stability. Never about compatibility or shared interests or whether they actually enjoyed each other's company. It was all transactional. All about what they could offer their women. The worst part was realizing how she'd weaponized my vulnerability. Every compliment had been designed to make me feel indebted to her attention. Every gift had strings attached. Every gesture of affection had been calculated to push me toward commitment before I could think clearly about what I actually wanted. I'd spent months after my divorce promising myself I wouldn't ignore red flags again, wouldn't get comfortable in dysfunction, wouldn't mistake intensity for intimacy. And here I was, a month into dating Serena, realizing I'd done it all over again. just in the opposite direction this time. The irony was brutal. I left a marriage where I felt unseen, only to end up with someone who saw me too clearly, as a prize to be won rather than a person to be known. Rhonda had ignored me. Serena was consuming me. Neither felt like love. I knew I had to end it, clean and final. Before she escalated even further, before she started talking about moving in together or meeting my family. Before I got so tangled up in her vision of our future that I forgot what I actually wanted mine to look like. The conversation wasn't going to be easy, but staying would be impossible.
I should have seen it coming when Christopher started pulling back. The delayed responses to my texts, the way he deflected when I brought up meeting his friends, how he got that tight look around his eyes whenever I mentioned anything about our future. But I thought I could fix it. I always thought I could fix things. When he said he wanted to slow down, I doubled down instead. Stupid, desperate, but I could feel him slipping away and I panicked. Started talking about how perfect we were together, how I'd never felt this way about anyone, how I knew he was still healing from his divorce, but I was patient enough to wait for him to catch up to what we both knew was inevitable. The look on his face when I suggested he meet my parents was pure horror. Not nervousness, not excitement, not even reluctance. Horror. Like I'd suggested we rob a bank together. That's when I knew I was losing him, but instead of backing off, I went nuclear. Told him I wasn't interested in wasting time on someone who couldn't recognize a good thing when he had it. Called him emotionally stunted. Said his divorce had obviously damaged him more than he wanted to admit. Accused him of being one of those men who want all the benefits of a relationship without any of the commitment. I was hurt and humiliated and desperate. So I said things designed to make him feel like the problem was his fear, not my pushiness. He just sat there taking it, which made me even angrier. That calm, rational expression that probably served him well in his medical practice, but felt like condescension when I was pouring my heart out. When I finally stopped talking, he said he was sorry but this wasn't working for him. That he wished me well, but he needed space to figure out what he actually wanted. Space. Like I was some kind of pressure he needed relief from instead of a woman who'd been offering him everything. I wanted to scream at him that he was making the biggest mistake of his life, that women like me didn't come around every day, that he'd regret this when he was alone again wondering why nobody wanted him. Instead, I just sat there watching him walk away. Again. Because that's what men like Christopher do. They walk away when things get real, when someone actually wants them for more than just fun and games. They want to be chased but not caught, wanted but not needed. The worst part was having to face everyone afterward. I'd been so confident about Christopher, so public about how serious we were, that backing down felt impossible. So I went with the narrative that felt safest, that he was afraid of strong women, intimidated by someone who knew what she wanted and wasn't ashamed to go after it. But the story didn't land the way I expected. Instead of sympathy, I got these looks. These knowing, pitying looks that made my skin crawl. Mutual friends started sharing glances when they thought I wasn't looking, whispering about how I'd come on too strong and scared off a good one. The humiliation was suffocating. Here I was, 37 years old, being talked about like some desperate woman who couldn't land a man. Like I was the problem, instead of all these emotionally unavailable men who couldn't handle a woman with standards. But the whispers kept coming, and they all said the same thing, that I'd pushed too hard, moved too fast, tried to lock him down before he was ready. What made it worse was knowing they were probably right. Not about me being desperate. I wasn't desperate, I was strategic. But about pushing too hard. I'd seen an opportunity, and grabbed for it instead of letting it come to me naturally. I treated Christopher like a prize to be won instead of a person to be known, and he'd seen right through it. The final insult came when Mike's wife mentioned that Christopher had seemed relieved when she'd asked him about the breakup. Relieved. Not heartbroken, not confused, not even disappointed. Relieved to be free of me. Like dating me had been some kind of burden he was grateful to put down. That's when I realized how completely I'd misread everything. All those compliments I'd given him, all that praise about being undervalued in his marriage, I'd thought I was building him up. Turns out I was just being obvious about wanting to secure him before someone else could. He'd seen through every gesture, every gift, every carefully crafted text message. I'd played myself, taken a perfectly good opportunity with a decent man, and turned it into a cautionary tale about desperate women who move too fast. Instead of being the woman who finally appreciated Christopher properly, I became the woman who reminded him why he needed to trust his instincts about red flags. Now I was back where I'd started, except worse. Single at 37 with a reputation for being a lot, and a fresh example of exactly how not to handle dating a recently divorced man. Meanwhile, Christopher was out there telling his friends how good it felt to set boundaries and trust his gut instincts. I'd wanted to be his second chance at love. Instead, I'd become his reminder that he deserved better than settling for someone who saw him as a prize instead of a person. The irony was brutal, but I couldn't even be angry about it. I'd done it to myself,